Now, this is the update following the terrible incident I did the earlier video on, following the allegations of a young lady who was sexually assaulted outside a church after leaving the Labyrinth nightclub in Epsom over the weekend. And as you can now see, there has been arrests made, although it hasn't been the perpetrators, it's been the protesters on Epsom High Street. Now, regarding the perpetrators, although we're a week into this story, almost, into the week, if it took place on the weekend, they have not released any new information. And that is what I believe is causing a lot of the frustration and tensions that are causing people to take to the streets to express themselves in various ways. And it's leading to some difficulties between the police and the protesters, who are keen and eager to get some information, especially the people who live in the community, although the police are obligated to operate under certain rules and guidelines, as you'll see expressed in some of these clips to follow. So let's get straight into it.
She says that she left a nightclub, Labyrinth nightclub on the high street. She was raped by an unknown number of men for a number of hours in a churchyard nearby. We now know, that there's plenty of CCTV, high definition CCTV and good lighting along that area. The police have appealed the last few days for information from locals, but they're not giving out any information themselves. They say they do not have yet full descriptions, in their words, of the alleged rapist. Local people on the street last night, surrounded by Riot Police, saying we're not getting information. We need to know that women and girls are safe. What's going on?
Yeah, I think the police have got a very difficult balance here. If they have got some information which helps them to identify a suspect and deal with the issue of race, which clearly is the elephant in the room here. If they've got some information, they probably need to get that out fairly quickly, because what we saw last night was not just local people. There were people using it as an opportunity to project a particular political agenda. But if the cops have got information that they are following that is going to lead to an arrest, well, they need to say that much more clearly to allay public fears. We're in this odd situation where, it happened in Essex, where there was the police there did not come out with a description of the suspect, and subsequently it was found to be an asylum seeker.
I just want to briefly add the fact that this is going on in leafy Surrey, in the heart of the suburbs, a normally tranquil and calm looking area. Okay, these things can happen in any part of town. It's quite astonishing. Also, the rioting is the least part of London that I'd expect this kind of a protest to be taking place, but there you have it. Crime happens anywhere.
There is a dangerous assumption being made by some people, but that's what's gone on in Surrey. If the police know that not to be true, they've got to say so fairly quickly.
Well, indeed. I mean, remember when, last August we were told they were going to speak more openly about this after what happened with Southport, and those rumours went wild on the internet, and we ended up with those riots. But then, of course, when we had the Liverpool case with a car rampage through Liverpool fans, we were told within, half an hour, this was a white man, British born, right, okay, stand down everybody. But of course people not unreasonably looked at this as a modus operandi used repeatedly across Britain and Europe by Islamist terrorists. It was not an unreasonable assumption. You say you think that race is a big issue. I don't think it is. I think it's national the national status. It's people's nationality that's the key thing.
So I'm no fan of Julia Hartley-Brewer or GB News or Talk TV, as we're going to be viewing some of their clips a little further on in the video. Hopefully you'll watch it through to the end. There's a reason why I want to segue here, because there's she brought up a good point. Now, for some time, you could say a little Donald Trump's presidency, definitely throughout the whole of Biden's presidency and prior to that, there's been a sort of a phenomenon in the news media, and I'm talking like primarily the US news media, although what happens over there comes over here very rapidly. They cough, we sneeze, or some kind of symbiotic relationship has always been described. So to the point, if you've ever caught Act News or Act Nation on YouTube. He covers a lot of crime and hood-related events, shall we say. And there's this particular phenomenon that he's pointed out. He's been talking about it and highlighting it for years. And I guess he's got quite a bit of pushback from the community for bringing it up, although it is valid. Now, what it is, when the often the more liberal-leaning media networks, news channels report on a story, they had this habit or this remit where they will not disclose the perpetrator's identity if they are of an ethnic background or a brown person. So they'll describe it like police are looking for so-and-so, 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 or it was a tall male, blah, 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 but they will not describe it as a black male. Police are seeking a light-skinned Afro-Caribbean or South American looking. They just won't go there at all. So the way he used to describe it, it was like, it's just like a blatant, you could call it a political bias, or they just don't want to portray, they don't want to emphasize any more than needs to be emphasized, that they at times is a lot of, well, I'm talking America here, there was a lot of, and probably still is a lot of disproportionate crime taking place, perpetrated by people of a particular ethnicity. So even myself here, I'm kind of like slightly caught up in that sort of way of describing things, just force a habit. So they wouldn't really, they'll shy away from describing the person's ethnicity, essentially. Now, if it was a white male or female or whatever the case might be, they'll just tell it as it is. But there was this unwritten rule. I thought it was an unwritten rule, and it was described as a clear as day way of reporting news in a definitely biased manner. There's an explanation that this lady in this next clip is gonna break it down, and it might be a way to explain away beyond just wokeness or liberalism or something like that. The reason for this approach in the media. So I'm in no way saying this is the definitive reason why the media tend to report things in a certain way with a clear bias, although this explanation, it does kind of ring slightly true, so take it with a pinch of salt.
If the public knew the truth of the news, there would be riots. It would be widespread. People would not be paying their taxes.
How do you know this?
Because Keir Starmer or his team, they issue DSMA notices. So when you read a news story, it will say a man of 40 has been arrested for abusing a woman of, well, normally a girl, isn't it? A child. They are omitting details of ethnicity, of location. That is because it's a DSMA notice. Because how
What's
often...
DSMA?
So it's they cannot run it. They cannot run this information, and it's under the guise of national security. You can't run it under national security.
So it's not the newspapers making it, because a lot of people are on Twitter going, "Oh, bloody newspaper, look at you."
So she's actually given an official explanation for this type of biased reporting. In any case, it's food for thought. So by the way, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. And we want to hear from you, especially on a subject as heated and as controversial as this. And let me know what you think if you have an opinion. And in the meantime, let's get back to the story.
Are the suspects likely to be foreigners? As in, did they speak with a foreign accent, or did they speak a foreign language when they attacked this woman? That sort of information. The concern from a lot of people is that a huge number, far too many, a growing number of assaults, sexual assaults and rapes are being carried out on women and girls in this country by people who have been allowed to come into this country who are a danger to us. Undocumented, unverified men from countries where their attitude towards women is very different from what it is in the Western liberal world. That is the concern, not the colour of their skin.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure we're going to come on and speak about the coaching of immigrants in a few months, and I'd welcome that. But And you're absolutely right. I think that the difficult decision for the police, and the one that they really need to be reconsidering today as a result of what happened last night, is the likely outcome of their investigation into this awful crime going to be hindered by releasing some information about the suspects? And if it's not, they need to get it out there very, very quickly.
Yeah. And what about sending the riot police out to this very peaceful protest? There's no hint that this is anything other than a peaceful protest, and yet riot police turn up.
It looked very strange, I have to say, and I would have thought that an intervention by a senior officer wearing ordinary non-combat clothing, explaining the dilemma that the police have got in these circumstances, would possibly have been more effective.
Yeah.
I think that you have to look at the composition of that crowd and make sure that it was just local people and it wasn't other people using it as an opportunity to pursue an agenda.
But that's the same with virtually any event, whether it's Clapham rioting teenagers, whether it's the pro-Islamic demonstrations outside Downing Street, people shouting Allahu Akbar with the flags of a regime that is bombing our RAF bases, whether it's the fortnightly pro-Palestinian marches. We're often told, well, we don't want to send riot police out, we don't want to be heavy-handed because that will just...
We know there are groups out there who will happily take advantage of tragic situations like this one that's been alleged here in Epsom, and we've only got not so long ago Southport to look back on. Hopefully both the police, the media and all parties have learned a little something from that. This doesn't go in that direction. From what I understand, some are looking at it as fairly heavy-handed, the way the police have responded. Maybe they'll just, playing safe precaution rather than the cure. The information releasing as far as the police and what they say they're allowed to share is so controversial when it comes to serious allegations like this. They say that if they release too much information too soon, it could hamper the investigation. And there's the other side of it as well, the exploitation of some information where maybe people would react too soon and they could be out there targeting perfectly innocent people who may sound close to the description, and then it all comes out in the wash and then the harm's already done. So I don't know, it's a very tricky one. Do the police give the public everything they have, or do they hold back until they're sure and certain? And how do they calm people's frustrations? This is something that has to be worked out. To preface this next clip, I'm also not a fan of Peter Bexley, although here with this conversation between him and Ian Collins, he does spit some facts.
Peter, after some people turned up in the high street at Epsom and then the riot police sort of almost out of nowhere showed up en masse, that at least yesterday afternoon wouldn't have to be the Chief Constable of Surrey Police, but the head honcho in Epsom would have said, right, I need to get this out there. We need to do a press conference, even if we genuinely don't have any information because the victim was unable to give it, whatever it happens to be. I need to put this on record and say it. But we've got an eerie silence coming out of Epsom today. Morning, Peter.
Good morning. Yeah, we certainly have. I think what we need to remind ourselves is that this crime is being reported as fact by the BBC and many other news outlets. There is no allegedly, there is no apparently about this crime. And that media reporting is based on what journalists are told by Surrey Police. So we can take it as an unshakable fact that this appalling gang rape took place. Now, if we move on from there, and it is now some days since that attack took place, nobody has been arrested, so the investigation is clearly ongoing. It would make absolute sense for the police to release descriptions of the attackers so that perhaps the public can help identify them and then they can be captured. And also, as a matter of public safety, the public can be warned about the possible, what these people look like, the clothing they wear, so on and so forth. But we're having nothing of it. Yet Surrey Police can turn out in their droves in full riot gear for when a few hundred people turn up to protest because they want to keep women safe.
And in terms of there not being any response from the police, look, we don't live in a country where we have a day-to-day commentary on every crime. This is a particularly brutal, very serious crime. But my sense on this, Peter, is that there's a tipping point with these things. And once you hit that tipping point where there is clear disquiet among the public and the locals, there is the potential for something to kick off. The anger has got to that stage. We were also told after Southport that going forward we will release details of suspects. Would it not be advisable for a police chief somewhere to come out, and even if they have to tell us, look, it's unusual, we literally don't have any descriptions. The victim was unable to supply those descriptions, and that could well be the case. But we need something from the police on this, Peter.
We certainly do. There's a raft of CCTV in Epsom, like there is just about everywhere in the UK. Surely there is CCTV footage of these attackers. But what the police are terrified of is it kicking off in the kind of way that it did after Southport. But actually, what they're doing by staying silent is only making matters worse. The police were issued with new guidelines after Southport about how they should communicate with the media and be more upfront and be more open. They're just trampling all over their own guidelines. They're increasing frustration. They're making people angry, and that is a very bad recipe.
Indeed. Peter.
In this last clip, they take a little deeper look into the police handling of the protests over there in Epsom and some of how the police tend to approach these things currently in this present climate, as they've been taking a lot of stick for how they handle these different situations. As Julia Hartley-Brewer was comparing it to the protests, which sometimes you'll hear those comparisons on these type of discussions. It's not an easy one for them, although you got to try and satisfy everybody as best you can, the public, and toe the legal line, as the police often have to do. And at the same time, not forgetting and losing focus on the victim and what they might be going through and their concerns and need for privacy and their family and anybody who might be connected to this type of a tragedy. So you have a lot of sometimes conflicting rights to be balanced there. The rights of the victim, the rights of the public to be given information in a timely manner so that they can feel safe and secure. And also sometimes, well, not sometimes, in our legal system, the rights of the accused, innocent until proven guilty. So we are told. So it's a bit of juggling goes on there. And as far as the media is concerned, they also hold a responsibility too, because they're often the ones who are relaying this information. That includes all kinds of media, social media, influencers, and citizen journalists.
In Epsom at the weekend, a horrific crime, a gang rape of a young girl who'd come out of a nightclub. It happened last Saturday outside a church, which rather sort of compounds the horror of this. We've heard nothing since then. We're just shy of a week away from when this happened. The police have released no details about the identity or who they're looking for, despite the fact that that part of Epsom has about 6 trillion CCTV cameras all over the place. I think you can reasonably argue that you might want that information. If there are rapists out there, people would need to know, is it that group? Is it a 6'8" ginger guy with a long beard? With that kind of information. See Crime Watch for details. These shows were predicated on descriptions, identities. Think of the old wanted posters back in the day. It's not a new request to want to know who the police might be looking for. Apparently, 5 days on, they're unable to produce anything. This, of course, has naturally provoked some disquiet. Many people went out onto the streets yesterday and said, look, can we have some information, please? And the police didn't give them information. What they did do instead was send 50 Riot squad officers to the scene.
I think this is absolutely disgraceful. I mean, first of all, It's such an awful story. The fact that it happened outside a church, as you say, and I've got my uncle and auntie live in Epsom, right? It's a lovely place. I think it was ranked the 12th most desirable place to live in Britain or something like that. And then the fact that something like this happens shows that the kinds of horrors that we are sadly getting inured from and used to hearing about happening in London and other big cities is spreading out to the suburbs, spreading out to the countryside soon, wherever you are listening or watching this program. It's these sorts of events seem to be more frequent and happening more and more. The fact that they haven't released anything might be because the poor victim isn't able to get it across or anything like that. But I think that the police and the authorities more broadly lose the benefit of the doubt on that front because they've been so reticent to share this kind of information for so long. Yep. And it's taken, I think, Neil O'Brien, the Conservative MP, pushing it and others to get various things like ethnicity to be released in crime statistics. Remember, of course, with Axel Ruda Cabana and Southport, he was described for a long time as a Welsh choir boy. And it turns out that it's probably not the most accurate description of that disgusting monster. Yeah. And the thing that really, really scares me, and on the screen you can see those riot police right now, is that unlike a lot of other protests that we've seen, the kind of disgusting anti-Jew hating Hamas marches and the like that we've seen in London for years now, since the October the 7th attacks, that have been very, very lightly policed, and people have been allowed to get away with screaming to kill the Jews and all that kind of horrible stuff. One fairly peaceful seeming to me protest of people just wanting to know what's happened in their community and being given some information so they can keep themselves and their families safe. The state has decided to come down on those people like an absolute ton of bricks. Why is that? I think the reason, it is really, really important. Yeah. They know that, like happened after Southport, that there were fears that things could really kick off and get very febrile, like in Epping Forest as well with Hadish Kabatu, and like happening now. This could cause a chain reaction of rioting and terror right across the country, because we've seen incidents like this happening all over the place. We know in many cases it is from people who've come over illegally in small boats of fighting-age men about whom we know nothing, and so on. And that's why they police it so heavily, because the state is terrified. And for the same reason, they don't police those Hamas marches properly, because they are also scared that if they did that, then things would kick off with a different group of people living in this country. Two-tier policing at its most egregious.
And what's interesting is that there have been cases before, and, I'm very, very pro-police. I think most people who've listened to me for any length of time will know that. But, and so this isn't usually the individual copper or detectives, PC or detectives' fault. These things come from higher up. But what is interesting is when we've seen situations where you think, where were the riot police? We're often told, well, you can't just magic up a load of riot gear. Right. They're not in every police station, but apparently the police in Epsom were able to conjure up quite a lot of riot. I know it's the Met. No, it wouldn't come under the Met, would it? It would come under Surrey Police. So, okay, the Met are next door, put it that way. So they might be able to get their hands on it. But even so, it did seem like a rather extraordinary show of force. I'm going to bring you this, though, James. Mark Kelly has got in touch with us, who says, Ian, I'm a detective, and I wanted to add something reference this Epsom rape and the idea that the police are hiding the identities of offenders. I can totally understand this reaction after the Southport murders, but there's also times when there's a good reason for not giving out a description. I'm not involved in this case, but it could be that the victim did not see the attackers. It could have been dark. Something could have been put over the victim's head to stop her from seeing. It could be that they'd knocked her unconscious, so didn't see them. It could be that she's confused about things and giving different descriptions. So whilst I get there is suspicion, there's also plenty of good reasons why they wouldn't be able to give a description yet, says Mark in York.
I mean, to put out the wrong information prematurely definitely leads to murky waters. So it's a tricky situation. So just before we end, we have a statement here from Assistant Chief Constable Sarah Graham, which is probably the only thing I've seen directly from the police to shed some light and reveal some information to the public.
Allegedly, this time last Saturday it was, very early hours of last Saturday morning. So this is Assistant Chief Constable Sarah Graham.
To date, we have not found any evidence of the offence as reported, but the investigation is ongoing. There has been much speculation about the non-release of a description of any suspects, especially regarding the ethnicity. No descriptions have been released, as the information about the incident and potential suspects is so limited. To address the specific commentary, there is no evidence that asylum seekers or immigrants were involved.
Well, that's what they're saying today, Rakib. Now, you will have seen, so this gang rape allegedly happened in the early hours of last Saturday morning, so pretty much a week ago. Local community very upset that no descriptions have been issued about any of the alleged assailants, the gang rapers. The suggestion being that it's woke policing and they're sitting on information that may implicate what some people were saying were immigrants and asylum seekers. I can't see how you would in any way leap to that conclusion. My suspicion, and what I assumed the local people were worried about, was this, that the alleged assailants were people of colour. In other words, they weren't white, and that was what the police are worried about. That's what the local people are worried about. In other words, sort of similar to the same syndrome that we encountered after the horrible Southport murders, when the suspect was described as Axel Rudikbala as a Welsh choir boy, a Welsh-born choir boy. That's what seems to be the case. Now, the police are now sort of indicating that they are trying to establish whether this happened. They wouldn't have any kind of description. What do you think is going on here, Rakib?
Well, Kevin, it's very hard to say. The waters are very murky at the moment. I think Surrey Police can take a great deal of responsibility for that. To my understanding, that this horrific incident took place over the weekend. So it's been some time since it actually occurred. And I think that it's really important, Kevin, that you mentioned the Southport atrocity, because I pointed out that there was a great deal of anti-Muslim disinformation which was peddled in the aftermath of that horrific atrocity. That there was conspiracy theories which ultimately were advancing the view that the suspect was a Middle Eastern migrant who'd crossed into the UK on a small boat.
That's right.
Which turned out to be wide off the mark. Actually, what we had was a teenager of Rwandan Christian heritage coming from a church-going family, no less. So I think that what's really clear now, a lot of people argue that local police forces, they should have the operational independence to reveal the background of these suspects in this particular crime, etc. But I think what's very clear here is that the police takes considerable time especially when it comes to crimes of this nature, in terms of revealing the background of suspects. People are going to speculate. You are going to see the dissemination of conspiracy theories. And actually what would be a lot better is if the police are transparent, especially when it comes to the background of suspects which are involved in this kind of crime. And I think that Surrey Police here, I don't think they've managed this particular incident as well as they could have.
In these situations.
Absolutely.
And I'm getting a lot of messages from people in the Epsom area who just aren't believing that there isn't any CCTV evidence. One guy actually directing me to some video that you can watch that does indicate that something happened. So this is the suspicion, and this is what that demonstration, that protest was about on Friday night, that this is another case of sort of woke policing where the coppers are reluctant to say the descriptions we've got are of people of colour, people of ethnic origin. They don't like doing that. Because they fear it might stir up kind of racial disquiet. In terms of asylum seekers and immigrants, I don't know how you extrapolate from a potential description of someone who's black or Asian that they're an immigrant or an asylum seeker. I don't know how you get to that point.
So since the first video, things have become a little bit more clearer, and hopefully at least in the next day or so, they'll have some real solid information to reveal to the public and calm people's fears down, and hopefully make some progress on finding and dealing with the perpetrators. It's already a very tragic story, which will be compounded if the protests then turns to rioting due to people's fears and feeling of not being fully informed by the authorities, and it's just a really sad story. we'll see how it develops. For now, you've been here with myself, Onyu Adye, Corner Speak. Be good, be safe, be creative. I'm out.